Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone online. Yeah, I mean, hearing what Bodhinaga was saying, I just feel huge gratitude that we're able to practice here in peace, that we're able to come together in the way that we are tonight, and sending that prayer out to the whole world that will come back as soon as possible. So in this series, Light in the Dark, we've explored how there can be different ways in, at different times in our lives, different ways in that can support our practice when life gets tough. So we've had the compassionate approach, the wisdom approach, the heroic approach, and tonight is the hardline approach. Renunciation, but actually I don't think renunciation is hardline. I think it's a little bit like discipline. I have a really positive relationship with discipline, and discipline gets me to do the things that I really want to do. And it's a little bit like that for me. Renunciation is actually the approach, oh, ladybird, that gives us what we really want by renouncing, giving up what we don't need. And I really love the idea that I'm starting to give that this talk is March the 1st, because this is a time of renunciation, isn't it? A time of abstinence. It's Pancake Day today. And it's that time of the year when we start to turn towards the idea of using up the last of our stores. We're desperate for spring. We just had enough of the winter, and a time of kind of quiet renunciation and abstinence is kind of in our genes, it's in our bones. It goes back a really, really long time in our culture, that March is the time of giving up. And when I was a kid, of course, I went to a Catholic school, Catholic upbringing, and Lent was the time that we gave stuff up. And I never really quite understood why, but it was always sweets. And so we gave up sweets, and the money that we would have spent on sweets went to a good cause. So, giving up stuff was quite a good, in my mind, is a good, I have kind of positive connotations with that. But about renunciation, I asked a few people what came to mind when they thought about renunciation. And generally it was kind of a nun or a monk in robes, a very sober, simple life, few possessions, a life of denial, sometimes extreme denial. But actually, some people talked about a very positive idea of that picture of purity and peace, and other people a more harsh, kind of punitive way of life. But generally solitary, not much fun. And, if this series of talks is about turning to the Dharma when things are tough, then why on earth would we want to bring something in that's even that, we have this idea, why make it even harder? And I would argue that renunciation is really crucial to giving us what we need most, actually. It's very, very positive. And it's the light of stillness, simplicity, and contentment in the seemingly dark moments of our life. So the Buddha, the lady bird, get off. The Buddha's going forth. The Buddha's going forth is a really strong central image, isn't it, of renunciation for us? The image of the robe and the bowl. He renounced the palace and all the luxury, and he went off into the forest, and he left his life of an endless round of fun and parties and all of that, and he just left it all and went into the forest. To live a life of hardship, really, really strong in those days. At that time, his life was, he was out in the elements with all the insects and the gadflies. Gadflies feature quite a lot in the suttas. They were troubled quite a lot by gadflies. Apparently, gadflies are like horrible little horseflies that bite. Well, lots of them. Wild animals, in India, actual wild animals and snakes. And I think his disciples, if they wanted to practice like him and practice that renunciation, that going forth in the way that the Buddha did and follow him, then that was the life that they were going to be in for. And I think about my practice, it gets a little bit chilly in the Great Hall every now and again, And that's kind of about as bad as it gets, you know, for me. So how do I practice renunciation here and now in my life? And why would I want to? You know, why did the Buddha want to? We talked about that. You know, he said that he found his life in the palace, his words, which I think is amazing, that we know what he actually said, as constricting, crowded, and dusty. That was how he felt about his life of luxury, actually, that it was constricting, crowded, and dusty. And he was yearning for a life that was wide open, complete, and pure as a polished shell. His words. Isn't that amazing? A life that was wide open, complete, and pure as a polished shell. A simple life of stillness, simplicity, and contentment. And of course, that I'm sure you recognize that as the third precept, that he perfected that, the precepts. He perfected that life of stillness, simplicity, and contentment. So what stops us? You know, yeah, that sounds great. I'll do that. Sign me up. You know, I'll have that life, please. So what stops me? What stops me having that life, just like that, going and doing it now? Well, that there is a really good reason why I can't just go and do that. And that's why it takes such a long practice, and how I'm standing here talking about it, because, you know, there is a reason. And part of it is that we're born with a kind of hardwired misunderstanding of who we are. We're born into this world with the wrong idea of there being a separate me in here and a separate you out there. So there's me in here and the world, and I'm separate from it. I'm not, but that's what I think. That's what we all think. And it's kind of something about survival, that I see myself, because I see myself as separate, then my whole life is about trying to stay safe and to. So Subhuti, a senior order member, said this thing that always kind of stuck in my mind, that we are a fragile ego in a sea of threat. That sounds really bleak, doesn't it? But actually, you know, that's our starting point. That's where we're beginning with this. And because of that, we're in this constant state of push and pull, pulling things towards me, always that make me feel better, make me feel connected and safe and have ease, and pushing things away that threaten that sense of ease and safety. And it's completely understandable. It's hardwired into the lizard brain, which is back here somewhere. You know, we're on this rock hurtling through space. And, you know, it's completely understandable that this is what we do. We cling to things that we hope will bring safety and ease, and we push things away that threaten that. And we're doing this to try and solve the problem of this separateness that we think that we are. And that kind of brings this kind of feeling that we don't have enough, that we are not enough, actually. Things aren't quite right. Things are never quite right. There must be something out there to make me feel better. There's got to be something out there, whatever that might be, to make this kind of not enoughness, not okayness better. And I can remember this so vividly, that I went on retreat, and it was a really tough retreat, you know, in the way that I kind of didn't really want to be there. Mainly, that was what it was. And I came back, and it was when I was living in the community with Mokshitara and Dharma Mai. And I burst in through the front door, straight to my iPad, found my iPad, and the sentence that went through my head was, clear as day, was, there's got to be something in here to take away the pain. That was the sentence that went through my head as I looked, and I was like, oh my God, you know, that was true. And I thought that I could find it in the iPad. And we think, you know, we kind of think we can. So we crave and we cling to things, and we turn towards things, and we're always doing it. But the trouble is, obviously, it doesn't work. If it did, my iPad would have given me everything I'd needed. But this kind of pushing and pulling and constantly grabbing and going for things becomes a strong habit, because we're always hoping that the next thing will do it. this time it'll work. And I can remember just before Christmas, I had, well, right the way through the autumn, really, I was looking for the perfect jumper. I was looking for the perfect jumper and the perfect hat, and Elle had my perfect jumper. And it was like, I wanted that jumper. And I was like, constantly looking to find the perfect jumper and the perfect hat. And the feeling, that kind of that habit of this, there was a part of me, I knew really that this jumper was not going to do it. But actually a part of me did think it would, that if I had that jumper, that I would be happy and that it would solve all my problems, solve all my clothes problems. I kind of didn't think it would, but I kind of did. And there was a vagueness about it. So actually there is a happy ending there. I actually, on January the 1st, I gave up clothes. I gave up clothes for a year. I gave up buying clothes for a year because I was just, that kind of pulling was actually very painful. Anyway, we'll come back to that. So we get locked into this cycle, trying to solve this problem of not enough. And we've all got our favorite ways of doing it. If I asked you, I'm not going to, but if I asked you to just say, yeah, you'd all put your hands up and you'd all have something. So the telly, chocolate, your phone, a nice glass of wine, a new house, a new car, whatever it might be, the next gadget, the next perfect jumper, whatever it might be, you'll have one. And it's a problem because it's a very big problem because they never work. You might get some kind of, the ladybird's back, they might get some temporary satisfaction from that, but we'll never be fully satisfied. Never, and we'll keep going round and round, and the grooves get deeper, the habit grooves get deeper and deeper. And then, we're in a constant state of frustration if we think we can get this problem solved from out there. We'll be constantly frustrated. This problem of separation is not going to be fixed by things that are out there, and we all have our favorite ones. So so these can't give us what we need because they don't last. And the main teaching that explains this to us, that the Buddha taught us to try and help us with this, is the teaching of the lakshanas, the 3 marks of conditioned existence that you all did probably on the intro course, that things are constantly changing. And in fact, there actually are no things in themselves, there is just change. And even if by some miracle we did find the thing out there that was the whatever it might be that made us feel better, it wouldn't last because we're spiritual beings and we can't be fully fulfilled by worldly things. We need something more than that. We need the truth. We need something. We need more than that. And the lakshanas teach us that. So these things that we go to, they're not going to last. They are constantly changing, and if we depend on things not changing for our ease and safety and well-being and feeling of okayness, then we're just setting ourselves up for unhappiness, for as the Buddha said, grief, sorrow, lamentation, and despair. Oh no. So that is a long way away, isn't it, from life pure as a polished shell? That is that constant pulling and constantly like chasing the next thing is a really long way away from stillness, simplicity, and contentment. So, this is where renunciation comes in. So renunciation isn't kind of random. I'm going to suggest that renunciation can be a practice of giving up these things that we go to. But, I could give up basket weaving like that, it's absolutely no problem. Yeah, great, I'll renounce basket weaving because I have no sticky attachment to basket weaving or surfing or kite flying, because it's just not, I don't have any sticky attachment to that. So I'm going to suggest that we give up, that we renounce these things that we go to. And we need to know what they are, so we need to know what they are. I think I know what mine are, and I'll tell you more about them. My iPad, my phone, clothes. So if we practice giving them up, if we know what they are, if we know what we turn to, in those moments of stress, those moments of difficulty, when we just have that feeling of not enoughness, that feeling of not being okay in our skin, that feeling of not being okay in our skin, then if we know what they are, then we can practice having a deepening understanding of the true nature of those things. And to know that fulfillment can never come from those things out there, because they won't last. They will let us down. We can't rely on them. And the more we do that, we'll suffer less, and the less harm we'll cause. Because in that push and pull, in the grabbing for stuff, we cause harm in that, and we cause harm to ourselves and others. So, yay, let's practice renunciation. So Sanghagita said, the point to be, Sanghagita, so he's the person who started off our movement, Triratna, my teacher. The point to be made is that if we really have some degree of vision of the true nature of existence, meaning the insubstantial and impermanent, and have really, to some extent, seen the inadequacy of material things, then our hold on them will be relaxed. And we will be quite willing and happy to let at least some of them go. That's quite encouraging, isn't it? So the extent to which we've seen through these things that we go for, we could call them refuges, false refuges. To that extent, we'll be able to hold our dukkha and our suffering in that bigger perspective of the lakshanas. And so let's think about practicing letting some of these things go. But words of caution, health warning alert. So these things are not going to go overnight. These have been our friends for a really, really long time, for lifetimes probably. And it's worth bearing in mind that not everything we turn to is unhelpful. And we have to work out our own. We have to know ourselves. What are our unhelpful things that we turn to? We have to work that out. And Sanghagita says as well, he says, there is no single uniform pattern of renunciation. No one has the right to say that because someone has not given up this or that particular thing, that they are not a practicing Buddhist. Different people will give up different things first, but the net result must be the same, to make life simpler and less cluttered. So life is a polished shell, stillness, simplicity, and contentment. If that's what we want, that's what we have to practice. So, yeah, these things have been with us for a really long time. We have to know ourselves well enough to know what it is that's going to be helpful for us to give up. So, and there has to be a lot of love in this, a lot of love in the process of getting, we're not getting rid of something evil. If I decide that I'm not going to look up, so I made a decision quite recently that I'm completely addicted to my phone. I got my phone in 2000. And when I got my first iPhone, it was just, it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And my iPad, I absolutely loved it. And I love my phone. And that was just, it meant, oh, wow. It was just so gorgeous and amazing. That has kept me plugged in there, day after day after day after day. And I thought, right, I've got to do something about this. So I told my friends, I told my Mitra group that I'm going to give my phone to Tara at 10 o'clock, at 7 o'clock every night. I'm just going to give my phone to Tara. In the end, it had to go to Padmasambhava because Tara was a bit, she kind of wasn't quite, I needed somebody who was really strict. So I gave my phone to Padmasambhava, my yidam, and at 7 o'clock every evening, and I don't look at it again until 9:30 in the morning. And that has been a massive renunciation for me. But actually what's happened is there's space in my head. What a surprise, I'm sleeping better. What a surprise, my meditations are better in the morning because my head is clearer. So it's not like my phone is evil. You know, it's that I started to understand my relationship to it a bit better. And I understood that it wasn't kind of making me. Thank you. Can you not hear me? Oh, you should have said. How long's that been going on for? Thank you. So these things aren't evil. It's not like there's anything inherently wrong in any of these things. Some are more harmful than others. Alcohol, drugs, you know, they're a little bit more harmful. But, you know, my phone isn't evil. It's my relationship to it that's the problem. So, giving it to Padmasambhava at 7 o'clock every evening and then starting it again at 9:30 in the morning has made a massive difference. But, you know, that's taken since 2000. No, when did I get that phone? Probably about 2000 for me to be able to do that. That's how long it's taken for me to be able to give my phone up. So we're talking like a really, really, really long time. So we might get disheartened if we think it's going to happen quicker than that. And we might give up giving up. So just go easy, you know, be really kind. You know, this has got to be, renunciation is an act, a real gift of kindness to yourself. If you think about, you know, discipline as being the thing that gets you to do the thing that you really want to do. It's what gets me to go for a run when I don't want to run, because I know it's really good for me. It's a little bit like that, you know, be really gentle with yourself. You could try going on retreat. Going on retreat is a really good way to renounce your whole, everything, really. You just renounce everything for a few days. So that's quite a good thing to do. And there are times when you're practicing this, there are times when you just go, oh, right, that, you know, that's it. I need positive distraction. I need to distract myself. And Sanghagita has talked about how positive distraction sometimes is really helpful. And when my dad died, after he died, and then between the period of him dying and his funeral was 3 weeks, and I watched every period drama ever made, back to back, back to back, back to back. Instead of drinking gin morning, noon, and night, I watched telly, and that was preferable. See what I mean? So you just gentle with yourself, know yourself well enough to how you can ease yourself off these things. So, and keep our eye on the prize. And the prize is really a life like a polished shell. It's the stillness, simplicity, and contentment. But that might not seem like a prize. There was a time when I would have thought that was really boring. No, I wouldn't have been remotely interested in that. And you know, I can remember saying to Parami, my public preceptor, remember a very kind of wise and kind teacher of mine. I said to her, I don't want to give up these pleasures. I don't want to renounce anything. I like my things. I like my phone. I like a glass of wine. I like chocolate and telly. I don't want to give them up. Why would I want to give them up? And she said, well, maybe you just haven't suffered enough. And I was like, that was like a really weird teaching. I was like, what on earth does she mean by that? And I think what she was trying to say was, you just haven't seen the suffering in those things enough yet. And I think she was right. And here is where we have this great teaching called wise attention. So, you know, where the teaching of wise and unwise attention. So with wise attention, we see all of the thing, not just the good bits. So, when that glass of wine is in front of me and it's icy cold and it's all sparkly and lovely, and I just think, oh, that's what I need. That's all I need to make me feel better. I don't see the wanting to go to sleep, when my friend's sitting there. I don't see the headache or the fuzziness. I just see how gorgeous it looks. So that's wise attention would see all of it, all of the thing that we want to go for, not just one side of it. With unwise attention, we just see what we want to see. And we just see the pleasure. We just see the pleasure in these things, and we don't see the difficulties, the effects, the unhelpful effects that they might have. So with wise attention, we start to see an uncluttered life and an uncluttered mind as pleasurable. And we start to, it took me a really, really long time, and still, I'm not there, obviously, but, to see stillness, simplicity, and contentment as pleasurable is practice. It's practice. So, my phone, that I began to look at my phone with wise attention, instead of only seeing the little squirt of dopamine that I'd get, the pleasure of that every time a message came in, or, that little kind of, that is built into the phone, that little like addictive, that's built in. I started to see the painful distraction of constantly turning to my phone. And I was starting to look at it with wise attention to see the pleasure that it gives, but also the downside of it. So cake is another massive thing that I turn to. With unwise attention, I'd only see the amazing pleasure of the cream and the sponge, and not the painful kind of realization that actually it's the last piece, and somebody over there might have actually wanted that when I'm sitting there with the cream all around the mouth. Like, oh yeah, sorry. And it's too late then, it's gone, I've ate it, I've eaten it. So wise attention sees all of it rather than just the good bits, just the bits that you want to see. So that helps. So, we train our mind and our body to turn towards the truth. And it feels really good, it feels way better than any of this stuff could. That the kind of the freedom that we can feel when we're free of these things, or even free of one thing for a day or for an hour, being free of these things that we turn to feels really, really good. So with wise attention, we pull the lens back and we see the whole aspect. And we can see how giving up chasing after these things can be helpful. So actually, what do we go to instead? What do we turn to instead of turning to these things? It's not abstract. It's not a kind of abstract idea of something, what do we do instead? It's an actual moment-to-moment practice of going for refuge to the three jewels, going for refuge, taking this to the feet of the Buddha, going to the Dharma and going to the Arya Sangha, the enlightened Sangha, taking this difficulty, taking this not enoughness to the three jewels. And we train our mind in that direction. So there are a few things that we can do where we, instead of going for refuge to cake, wine, telly, chocolate, sometimes even people, sometimes even ideas about ourselves, instead of going there, we take that instead to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And they are the true refuges that are not going to let us down. And they are where we can go for real refuge and real safety. And they won't be disappointing. How do we do that? So one of the ways is, do you remember the gap from the intro course? So in the gap, We are there, aren't we? In the discomfort in our body. Ow, ow, ow. We know before we do the grabbing, before we do the pushing and the pulling, there we are, and it's in our body. Feeling what we're feeling and allowing ourselves to do that with kindness, putting our arms around ourselves and just allowing ourselves to feel what we're feeling with love and as much kindness as we can muster. We are going for refuge to the Dharma because we're in line, much more in line with reality. Oh, it's my phone. Oh my God. See, I didn't switch it on. Is that a stamina? How funny. Classic. So yeah, and we're here, aren't we? On this, very, it's very poignant, isn't it, that we're here, and around the world there are terrible things happening. And when the practice of being with what arises in us when we think about that stuff, that is tough. So what arises can be terrible, terrible suffering when we bring to mind the suffering of other beings. And all we can do is hold that with love in our own being, hold that with love. And that's all we can do. That's it. That's all we can do in that moment. And that same practice applies to all of these things that we grab towards ourselves, push away, all that pushing and pulling. We just stop doing that. And we just hold whatever's there with as much love as we can muster. And then it changes and something else emerges. It's a bit magic the way that works. That's one thing we can do. So another thing we can do is we can really listen to these things. Oh my God. So this is another thing. The iPad spoke to me. Well, though I was in evolution with, it was probably Christmas. I used to work in evolution. It was the shop that we had in town, and it was really hard work. And I think it was Christmas probably. I was really tired and I hadn't slept for weeks and weeks. And it was just really, it wasn't easy. And I remember just turning and catching my eye on a piece of cake. And the cake said to me, all you need is me, and I will make everything better. Honestly, it was just as if the cake had a little mouth and spoke to me. And so that's what we can do. We can really listen. They say things. And it's obviously it's not them, but we have there's a little thing going on where they actually speak. And listen really carefully. What arises in your mind? What are you thinking when, like the iPad says, I'm the only thing that can take away the pain, or have me and you'll be all right, said the cake. That's a strong practice. Listen really carefully to what arises when you're just about to grab the thing, or you're just about to push the thing away. Just listen. So we're talking about going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. We're talking about going for refuge to the Dharma, in that we are closer to the truth when we do this. We can think, will this actually work? Will this work? Will this take away this pain? And sometimes I just go, yeah, it will. I just do. And other times I just keep asking the question. Just keep asking the question. Wise attention. Will it work? Can I see the whole of this? We can also connect with the Arya Sangha, with the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas that we see around us. We can connect with the Sangha jewel by chanting a mantra in those moments of difficulty when we're in the push and pull. We can chant a mantra, and the mantra means that which protects the mind. So a mantra will protect us from this. You know, if we're connected to it, we can say a prayer to the Buddha, the Dharma, to the Buddha or the Bodhisattvas that we have a connection with. Bring him to mind with his robe and his bowl. We can clock the freedom. That's one of the most important things. We can clock and feel how amazing it feels when we just feel free of it. And often that's on retreat, or a day retreat here, when we go home and we just feel so much better. Sometimes at the end of Sangha night, sometimes in a meditation, we can feel free of it. And we get that sense of contentment, that there's enough in here. I've got enough, don't need to be grabbing. I'm fine as I am, and I've got everything I need. And if none of that works, I've got more, but I don't want to go on. Gratitude's another one, because that connects us. It's another Dharma practice. If all else fails, do something for someone else. Dada Rinpoche always said, if you don't know what to do something for someone else. And just go out and, you know, if you're craving cake or if you're craving coffee or whatever it might be, go to a cafe and do a pay it forward. Do a pay it forward for someone else and let them have it. Something like that. So in this work, and it's hard work, in this work, but anything worthwhile is hard, isn't it? Anything worthwhile, it takes a bit of doing. In this work, we start to see through our false refuges. We can call them false refuges because they're not a refuge. Then they don't give us safety. With this wise attention, we can start to see through them the way Sanghagita suggests that we do. And they lose their power over us just a bit. And what a lot of energy is released then. It's a lot of energy. And you will have known this. You'll definitely have experienced it. We're released from this cycle of craving, and our life is simpler, less stressful. We suffer less, and we cause less harm because we're not in the push and pull. And Sanghagita is a big fan of renunciation because he said it's the antidote to consumerism, and it's something we can practice to save, in an attempt to put less pressure on the planet. And that was a long time ago he said those things, but it still holds true. And we can exemplify that a simpler life is possible, that we don't need to have all these things. We can have a simpler life. And in this work, contentment arises. Stillness, simplicity, and contentment arises. So we feel we're more and more fully exemplifying the third precept. So the stillness aspect of that, we're no longer pushing and pulling. So if I feel still in here, I skip past now charity shops and I don't even think of going in them. I don't even think, because I've given it up for a year. I don't even think of going in a charity shop for clothes now. And it's like, la, 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 I just walk past and I don't even think about it. I'm not on my phone looking for clothes. No, I've got plenty of refuges, false refuges still to go. But for now, at the moment, that is working for me. So I'm sure you've got similar examples. So with simplicity, we're no longer filling our minds and our houses with unnecessary clutter. And the contentment aspect is we kind of know that we have enough, that we are enough, and we have the practice we need to reliably address the problem of separateness. We don't need to go to the false places of safety, the refuges that aren't going to help us. We've got something that will reliably address that problem, which is going for refuge to the three jewels. And faith arises. Renouncing that cycle of chasing after happiness, we see more clearly the truth of what we really need and what really makes us happy and really makes us content, which gives us more faith and energy, which makes us want to renounce even more. So, bearing in mind all of the things that we talked about, the words of warning about not going too mad and being gentle with ourselves. So, if we want peace and freedom and contentment, we need to turn towards things that bring us peace and freedom and contentment, the three jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And that in that way, a simple life, wide open, complete, and pure as a polished shell.